In this video, I'm going to walk you through how to factor this polynomial. And when you approach any factoring problem, the first thing you want to look for is if all the terms have something in common. And in this case, they do. They all have a z. So the first thing we're going to do is factor the z out of this polynomial. So what's left over if I pull out a z from each term? I have 12z squared. It went from z cubed down to z squared. And then the 13z squared now becomes 13z because I took out a z. And then the minus 4z just ends up being a minus 4. So now what we need to do is we need to continue factoring this polynomial. So I'm going to carry down the z. I don't want to lose that factor. And it's easy to do that sometimes when you're so focused on what's left over, that polynomial, but you have to remember to bring down that other factor. So to continue factoring this polynomial that's left over in the parentheses, we're going to use what's known as the AC method. I use the AC method because if this is my A coefficient, my B coefficient, and my C coefficient, I'm multiplying in this method. I'm multiplying my A times my C. So in this case, I'm taking a 12 times a negative 4, and that gives me a negative 48. So this is my A times C. I get a negative 48. So now what we need to do is we need to find the combination of when I multiply the combination, I get a negative 48, but when I add the combination, I get a 13 in the middle. So when we start listing out of all of our different possibilities, I could have a 1 and 48. One of them has to be plus and one of them has to be minus to get a negative 48. So keep that in mind. I could have a 2 and 24. I could have a 3 and a 16. Oh, there's our combination right there. I don't have to go any further. I could use a negative 3 and a positive 16. These would multiply to give me negative 48, but add to give me positive 13 in the middle. So now I'm going to rewrite 12z squared. But what I'm going to do with this combination I'm going to use to rewrite 13. So instead of leaving it as 13z, I'm going to rewrite it as minus 3z plus 16z minus 4. So I just rewrote 13z as a minus 3z and a plus 16z to get that combination. Okay, now, again, I'm going to keep bringing down this factor off to the side that we already pulled out. Now I'm going to use the grouping method. So when I look at the first two terms, what they have in common is a 3z. And what would be left over is 4z minus 1. Now when we use the grouping method, I want my parentheses to be the same. This has to be the same as this parentheses here. So I need to figure out what do I need to pull out and put in front here. So when I multiply it by 4z minus 1, I get 16z minus 4. Well, that would have to be a positive 4. Because if I take 4 times 4z, that gives me the 16z. And if I take 4 times negative 1, that gives me the negative 4. So I factored the first two terms, I factored the second two terms, with these two terms being the same. So now I can finish this off and say, well, I have a 4z minus 1 in common. And what's left over after I take out the 4z minus 1 would be the 3z plus 4. So my final answer, when I factor 12z cubed plus 13z squared minus 4z, when I completely factor it, I get three factors: z times 4z minus 1